The cartographer's Discovery Captain Zethara pressed her six-fingered hands against the cool metal of the navigation console. Her purple skin showed stress patterns that her crew had learned to recognize over the years. The star charts spread. Before her told a story that made no sense. For 300 years, the Galactic Mapping Consortium had been the pride of civilized space. Every known species had contributed to the Great Map. The tall, tree-like Vorthok had mapped the dense star clusters of the outer rim. The crystalline Nexari had charted the dangerous nebula fields where normal ships would be destroyed. Even the tiny pipsqueaks, barely larger than a human thumb, had sent their microships into asteroid fields to map every small rock and dust cloud. But there was one section that remained blank, a small area of space marked only with the words human. Space, in basic galactic script. No trade routes went there, no diplomatic missions had ever returned from that direction. Most strange of all, no humans had ever contacted the consortium. Every other species had made first contact within decades of achieving spaceflight. The consortium's welcome protocols were well established. New species would send nervous radio, signals, then crewed ships, then formal ambassadors. It was always the same pattern, always. Except for the humans, Zethara had been studying this puzzle for months. Her research showed that humans had achieved space travel over 4 centuries. Ago, they should have made contact long before now. Yet the section of space they claimed remained as mysterious as a black hole. 3 weeks ago, she had finally convinced the Council to send a deep space probe toward the human border. The probe was equipped with the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. It could detect life signs from 50 light-years away. It could translate basic mathematics into any known language. It carried samples of the finest art, music, and literature from dozens of worlds. Today, the probe had reached its destination. Zethara stared at the readings with growing confusion. The probe had found the border of human space easily enough. There were clear signs that someone lived there. Energy readings showed massive structures, possibly cities or space stations. Heat signatures suggested billions of inhabitants. Everything pointed to a thriving civilization. But when the probe tried to make contact, something impossible happened. Nothing. Not the nothing of empty space or dead worlds. Not the nothing of a civilization that had destroyed itself. This was different. This was the nothing of a door being deliberately kept closed. The probe's communication arrays were working perfectly. Its universal translators were functioning normally. Its friendship protocols were broadcasting on every known frequency. But every signal simply vanished into the void as if it had never existed. More disturbing were the probe's sensor readings. As it approached the border, its instruments began to register something they had never encountered before. The probe was being scanned, not just observed or detected, but thoroughly examined by technologies that made no sense to galactic science. The scanning wasn't aggressive or threatening. It felt almost polite, like a customs inspector checking the contents of a traveler's bag. But the level of detail was frightening. Whatever was scanning the probe knew everything about it. Its construction, its purpose, its origin, even the individual atomic signatures of its components. Then the scanning stopped, and the silence began. Zethara had waited for hours, then days, for some kind of response. Any response, a hostile warning, would have been better than this complete absence of reaction. It was as if the humans had looked at the probe, understood everything about it and its mission, and decided it wasn't worth acknowledging. She called up the historical records again, searching for any clue she might have missed. The earliest, mentions of humans dated back 400 years, when long-range telescopes had detected their first primitive spacecraft. The records showed steady technological advancement, orbital stations, then ships traveling to nearby star systems. But then, about 3 centuries ago, something changed. The human ships became harder to detect. Their energy signatures grew fainter. Their radio transmissions stopped entirely. It was as if they had simply faded away from galactic awareness. Most species assumed the humans had died out. Space was dangerous, and young civilizations often destroyed themselves before reaching maturity. The Galactic Council had marked human space as dormant and moved on to more pressing matters. Only Zethara seemed to care about the mystery. Her colleagues thought she was wasting time on a dead civilization. The Council had better things to worry about than extinct primitives. But the probe's readings proved the humans weren't extinct. They were there, in numbers that suggested a population larger than most galactic civilizations. They had technology advanced enough to scan a probe from light years away. They had chosen not to respond. The choice was what bothered Zethara most. Every other species in the galaxy wanted to make contact, to trade, to share knowledge and culture. It was natural, almost instinctive. Living beings reached out to other living beings. It was one of the fundamental truths of galactic civilization, except for the humans. Zethara pulled up the probe's final transmission. The readings showed massive energy sources throughout human space. Not the chaotic signatures of a struggling civilization, but clean, controlled power on a scale that dwarfed anything the galaxy had achieved. Whatever the humans were doing, they were doing it very well. So why the silence? The obvious answer was that the humans didn't want contact, but that raised even more questions. Why would a species voluntarily isolate itself? What could they gain from staying hidden? What were they afraid of? Or perhaps the more frightening question, what did they know that the rest of the galaxy didn't? Zethara had spent her entire career mapping the unknown regions of space. She had discovered 17 new civilizations and first contacted 12 species that were now valued members of the galactic community. She understood the excitement of finding new friends among the stars, but this felt different. The silence from human space wasn't the quiet of an empty room. It was the quiet of someone holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The probe was still there, still broadcasting its messages of friendship and scientific cooperation, still being ignored with what felt like deliberate politeness. The humans knew it was there. They had examined it thoroughly. They had chosen not to respond. Zethara made a decision that would change everything. She began composing a message to the Galactic Council, requesting permission to mount a diplomatic mission to human space. Not another probe, but a real ship with real people aboard. If the humans wouldn't talk to machines, perhaps they would talk to living beings. She suspected the Council would refuse. They had more important concerns than chasing mysteries. The ongoing war between the Keth and the Zorial required constant attention. Trade disputes needed to be resolved. New worlds needed to be integrated into galactic society. But Zethara had to try. The silence from human space felt like a puzzle that needed solving, a door that needed opening. Something told her that whatever lay behind that door would be more important than any war or trade dispute. She just hoped the galaxy was ready for what they might find. As she finished her report, Zethara glanced once more at the star charts. The section marked Human Space seemed to stare back at her, a blank spot in the middle of the galaxy's most complete map. A reminder that even after 3 centuries of exploration, there were still mysteries waiting to be discovered. The probe continued its lonely vigil at the border, broadcasting messages that no one would answer. But in human space, in the clean energy signatures and massive structures that showed no signs of decay or abandonment, something was listening. Something was waiting. The diplomatic mission. The council chamber buzzed with the voices of a dozen different species. Zethara stood at the center of the circular room, feeling small under the weight of so many skeptical stares. Her proposal had been met with everything, from confusion to outright laughter. Counselor Vex, a massive creature with rock-like skin and glowing red eyes, leaned forward in his seat. "Captain Zethara, you want us to approve a diplomatic mission to a dead civilization. This seems like a waste of resources we cannot spare." "The humans aren't dead," Zethara replied, keeping her voice steady. "The probe readings clearly show massive population centers and advanced technology. They're there, they're thriving, and they're choosing not to respond to our contact attempts." "Perhaps they don't want contact," suggested Counselor Nira, her insect-like features clicking with disapproval. "We should respect their wishes and leave them alone." "Or perhaps they're afraid," said Counselor Thorne, the elderly leader whose species had been the first to form the Galactic Consortium. "A young civilization might fear contact with the wider galaxy. We've seen this before." Zethara shook her head. "The energy readings don't match a fearful civilization. These are controlled, massive power sources. The humans have technology we can barely understand. They're not hiding from us out of fear." The debate continued for hours. Some council members worried about the cost of the mission. Others feared it might be a trap. A few simply didn't care about solving the mystery of human space. But Zethara had allies. Counselor Merrick, whose people had been contacted by Zethara herself 20 years earlier, spoke passionately about the importance of reaching out to isolated civilizations. Counselor Yill reminded the chamber that the consortium's founding principles required them to welcome all peaceful species into the galactic community. Finally, after much arguing, the council reached a compromise. Zethara would be allowed to take a single ship to human space, but she could only stay for 2 weeks. If the humans still refused contact after that time, the matter would be considered closed. 3 weeks later, Zethara stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony. Her crew was small but diverse. Dr. Kess, a brilliant linguist whose feathered species had mastered over 3,000 languages. Engineer Bollix, whose mechanical people were the galaxy's finest tech specialists. Navigator Senna, whose mathematical gifts had helped map more star systems than anyone alive. Each crew member had volunteered for what many considered a pointless mission. But Zethara had chosen them carefully. They were all people who believed in the importance of making contact with new civilizations, no matter how strange or difficult. The journey to human space took 2 weeks. As they traveled, the crew prepared for every possibility they could imagine. Dr. Kess updated his translation protocols with every human language fragment that had ever been detected. Engineer Bollix checked and rechecked the ship's defensive systems, just in case. Navigator Senna plotted multiple escape routes from human space, hoping they wouldn't be needed. But as they approached the border, something unexpected began to happen. The ship's computers started acting strangely, not malfunctioning exactly, but behaving in ways that made no sense. Navigation systems would suddenly display star charts with impossible detail. The communication array began picking up signals that contained no actual information but felt somehow meaningful. The ship's medical scanners started performing full health checks on the crew without being asked. "Captain," Engineer Bollix reported, his mechanical voice carrying an unusual note of confusion. "Our systems are being accessed, but I can't find any sign of intrusion. It's as if the ship is volunteering information." Dr. Kess looked up from his translation console. "I'm detecting scanning attempts, but they're unlike anything in our databases. Whatever is examining us isn't using any technology we recognize." Zethara felt a chill run through her purple skin. The stories from the probe were repeating themselves, but this time with living beings aboard. Something in human space was studying them with the same thorough, polite attention that had been given to the unmanned probe. But unlike the probe, the Harmony carried diplomatic protocols and living minds capable of communication. If the humans were scanning them, perhaps they would finally get a response. The answer came 3 days after crossing into human space. Zethara was reviewing diplomatic protocols when Navigator Senna called out in excitement. "Captain, I'm detecting ships approaching our position. 3 vessels, configuration unknown." The crew gathered on the bridge to watch the approaching ships appear on their screens. What they saw left them speechless. The human vessels were beautiful in a way that defied explanation. They had clean, flowing lines that seemed to bend light around them. No visible weapons, no obvious propulsion systems, no energy signatures that their instruments could identify. They moved through space like living things, graceful and confident. "How are they moving?" Engineer Bollocks asked, his sensors working frantically to understand what they were seeing. "I can't detect any drive systems, any fuel consumption, any thrust mechanisms at all." "And they're not using subspace communication," Dr. Kess added. "But somehow I'm receiving what feels like a greeting, not in words but in concepts." Before anyone could respond, the lead human ship was alongside the Harmony. A docking tube extended from its hull and sealed against their airlock with perfect precision. No requests for permission, no exchange of technical specifications, no discussion of environmental compatibility. The humans simply attached their ship as if they had built both vessels themselves. "Should we open the airlock?" Navigator Senna asked nervously. Zathara straightened her diplomatic uniform and nodded. "We came here to make contact. Let's see what happens." The airlock opened, and 3 humans stepped aboard. Zathara had seen images of humans before, but meeting them in person was different. They looked remarkably similar to the ancient records, but there was something in their eyes that spoke of centuries of experience. They moved with quiet confidence, as if boarding alien ships was something they did every day. The lead human was a tall woman with dark skin and graying hair. She smiled warmly at the gathered crew and spoke in perfect galactic standard. "Welcome to human space. I'm Admiral Chen. We've been expecting you." Dr. Kess nearly fell over. "You speak galactic standard? But how? When did you learn our languages?" Admiral Chen's smile widened slightly. "We've been listening for quite some time, Dr. Kess. Your translation protocols are impressive but hardly necessary. We learned your languages decades ago." "You know who I am?" Dr. Kess asked, his feathers ruffling with surprise. "We know all of you," Admiral Chen replied simply. "Captain Zathara, the finest cartographer in the galaxy. Engineer Bollocks, whose technical innovations have improved ship safety throughout known space. Navigator Senna, who discovered the Kalos Passage that shortened trade routes by 30%. The crew exchanged nervous glances. How could the humans know so much about them? More importantly, why hadn't they ever made contact if they knew so much about galactic civilization? "Admiral Chen," Zathara said carefully, "the Galactic Consortium has been trying to contact your people for months. Why haven't you responded to our diplomatic overtures?" Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "That's a complex question, Captain. Perhaps it would be better discussed somewhere more comfortable. Would you and your crew be willing to visit one of our stations? I think you'll find the conversation quite enlightening." Zathara looked at her crew. Each of them nodded, slightly. They had come this far to solve the mystery of human space. It would be foolish to turn back now. "We accept your invitation," Zathara said formally. Admiral Chen's smile returned. "Excellent. Please follow us. There's much to show you and even more to discuss." As the humans returned to their ship, Zathara felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They were about to become the first galactic citizens to visit human space in centuries. Whatever they learned, there would change everything. The human ships began moving again, leading the Harmony deeper into their territory. As they traveled, Zathara noticed that space itself seemed different here. Cleaner somehow, more organized. Even the stars seemed to shine with a steadier light. Behind them, the border of human space faded into the distance. Ahead lay answers to questions the galaxy had been asking for 300 years. Zathara just hoped they were ready for what they would learn. The revelation. The human station appeared gradually, growing larger as they approached until it dominated the view screen. Zathara had seen many impressive structures in her career, but nothing like this. The station was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, yet it moved through space with impossible grace. "By the stars," whispered Navigator Senna. "How is something that large even stable? The gravitational stresses alone should tear it apart." Engineer Bollocks was scanning frantically, his mechanical sensors working overtime. "Captain, I'm not detecting any structural supports, any gravity generators, any of the technology that should be keeping this thing together. It's as if the laws of physics are being politely ignored." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system. "Docking Bay 7 is prepared for your vessel. Please follow the guidance lights." As the Harmony settled into the docking bay, Zethara noticed that the entire process felt effortless. No struggling with gravitational fields or atmospheric pressure differences. The bay seemed to adjust itself to accommodate their ship perfectly. When they stepped off the Harmony, they found themselves in a space that shouldn't have been possible. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold 100 ships like theirs, yet the atmosphere was perfectly breathable for all 4 species represented in the crew. The lighting was soft and pleasant, and the gravity felt exactly right for each of them simultaneously. "How is this possible?" Dr. Kess asked, his translation equipment working overtime to process what his senses were telling him. "The environmental needs of our species are completely different. This should be a compromise that satisfies no one." Admiral Chen, who had been waiting for them, smiled patiently. "We've had some time to work on the technical problems, Dr. Kess. When you can manipulate matter at the quantum level, environmental compatibility becomes much simpler." The tour that followed left the crew speechless. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past windows that showed impossible views of space and time. They saw gardens where plants from dozens of worlds grew together in perfect harmony, despite requiring completely different soil, light, and atmospheric conditions. In one laboratory, human scientists worked with equipment that made no sense to galactic science. Devices that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Computers that processed information faster than light. Screens showing mathematical equations that hurt to look at directly. "This is our cultural exchange center," Admiral Chen explained, as they entered a vast chamber filled with art and artifacts from across the galaxy. "We've been collecting and studying galactic civilization for quite some time." Zethara stopped in front of a display case containing a ceremonial dagger from her homeworld. The weapon was over 800 years old and had been lost in a museum robbery 50 years before she was born. "How do you have this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been watching," Admiral Chen said simply. "We've been learning. We've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" Engineer Bollocks demanded, his mechanical voice carrying an edge of frustration. Admiral Chen led them to a comfortable seating area where refreshments had been prepared. Each crew member found food and drink perfectly suited to their species' needs, despite the fact that no human should have known their dietary requirements. "Waiting for the galaxy to be ready," Admiral Chen said, settling into her chair. "Please, sit. There's much to explain and some of it may be difficult to hear." Zethara sat down carefully, accepting a cup of her favorite tea from her homeworld. The taste was perfect, exactly as her grandmother had made it. The implications were staggering. 3 centuries ago, Admiral Chen began, humanity made first. Contact with galactic civilization, much as you would expect. We sent radio signals, then crewed ships, then formal ambassadors. We were excited to join the community of intelligent species. Dr. Kess leaned forward. "But we have no records of any human contact attempts." "No, you wouldn't," Admiral Chen agreed, "because we never sent them. We stopped before making formal contact." "Why?" Zethara asked. Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. "Because we learned about the galaxy, and we weren't impressed." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Navigator Senna was the first to recover. "Not impressed? The galactic community represents thousands of worlds, billions of beings, and centuries of cooperation and advancement. Yes, Admiral, Chen said. And in all that time, what have you accomplished? The question seemed absurd. Engineer Bollock started listing achievements immediately. We've ended wars, established trade routes, shared technology, explored new worlds, created art and literature that spans dozens of species. You've managed your problems, Admiral Chen interrupted gently. You haven't solved them. In 3 centuries of galactic civilization, how many wars are currently being fought? The crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. The answer was depressing. Dozens, Zathara admitted, but that's down from hundreds in earlier periods. How many worlds still struggle with poverty, disease, or resource shortages? Thousands, Dr. Kess said quietly. But progress takes time. How many species still believe that some must suffer for others to prosper? Navigator Senna couldn't meet Admiral Chen's eyes. Most of them, she whispered. Admiral Chen nodded sadly. We spent 50 years observing galactic civilization. We watched wars fought over resources that could have been shared. We saw species that could have been lifted up instead being left behind. We observed a community that had the knowledge to create paradise for everyone, but chose instead to accept that some would live in misery. That's not fair, Zathara protested. Change takes time. Progress is slow. You can't expect perfection. Can't we? Admiral Chen asked. Captain, in the 3 centuries that galactic civilization has been managing its problems, humanity has solved them. She gestured toward the walls of the station. We don't fight wars because we eliminated scarcity. We don't struggle with disease because we mastered biology. We don't argue over territory because we learned to create space itself. Engineer Bollock's sensors were working frantically. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone, only impossible if you accept the limitations that the galaxy has convinced itself are permanent, Admiral Chen said. We spent the first 100 years after our isolation breakthrough developing zero-point energy extraction, unlimited power, from the quantum foam itself. She touched a control panel, and a holographic display showed the human power grid. The energy numbers were staggering, orders of magnitude beyond anything in galactic science. The second 100 years were devoted to mastering matter manipulation at the quantum level. When you can restructure atoms at will, material shortages become meaningless. Another display showed human manufacturing facilities creating complex materials from basic elements. The crew watched in awe as diamond harder than any known substance was grown from atmospheric carbon in seconds. The third 100 years brought us mastery over space-time itself, faster than light travel without exotic matter, artificial gravity without massive generators, pocket dimensions for storage and manufacturing. Dr. Kess was frantically taking notes, though his equipment was struggling to keep up with the technical specifications being displayed. This is impossible, he muttered. These technologies violate known physics. They violate galactic physics, Admiral Chen corrected. Physics itself is much more flexible than your scientists believe. Zathara felt overwhelmed. Everything she thought she knew about the limitations of technology was being rewritten before her eyes. If you've solved all these problems, why haven't you shared the solutions? Why haven't you helped the galaxy? Admiral Chen's expression grew sad. We tried, Captain. Not directly, but we tried. We've been quietly releasing technological hints for decades, medical advances that could have ended disease, energy solutions that could have ended scarcity, agricultural techniques that could have ended hunger. I don't understand, Navigator Senna said. Think about it, Admiral Chen said. In the last 50 years, how many mysterious technological breakthroughs have appeared in galactic civilization? Advances that seem to come from nowhere, that couldn't be traced to any specific research program? The crew thought about it. There had been quite a few unexplained advances in recent decades. Everyone had assumed they were the result of collaborative research or lucky accidents. Those were gifts from humanity, Admiral Chen confirmed. We've been trying to nudge galactic civilization toward better solutions for decades. And do you know what happened to most of our gifts? Zathara had a sinking feeling she knew the answer. They were weaponized, Admiral Chen said simply. Medical, technology became biological weapons. Energy solutions were turned into bombs. Agricultural advances were restricted to wealthy worlds, while poor ones continued to starve. The silence in the room was deafening. So we stopped giving gifts, Admiral. Chen continued. And we waited. We watched. We hoped that eventually, galactic civilization would mature enough to deserve the tools we could offer. And have we? Zathara asked, though she feared the answer. Admiral Chen looked at each of them in turn. That remains to be seen. Your arrival here suggests that some individuals in the galaxy are ready to ask the right questions, but individuals aren't civilizations. The demonstration. The message from the Galactic Council arrived 3 days after Zathara's initial report. The response was predictably skeptical, bordering on dismissive. Counselor Vex's recorded message was particularly blunt. Captain Zathara, your claims about human technological capabilities are difficult to believe. While we appreciate your enthusiasm for first contact protocols, we require concrete evidence before the Council can take any formal action regarding human space. Admiral Chen read the message with what appeared to be mild amusement. They want proof, she said simply. That's understandable. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Dr. Kess looked nervous. Admiral, with respect, the Council isn't known for being impressed easily. Some of them have been around for centuries. They've seen a lot of technological demonstrations. I'm sure they have, Admiral Chen replied, but I doubt they've seen anything like what we can show them. She led the crew to what she called a demonstration facility. Though the room looked more like an art gallery than a laboratory, the walls were lined with display cases containing objects that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. The Council wants evidence of our technological capabilities, Admiral Chen said. Where would you like us to start? Engineer Bollocks immediately activated his sensors. Those devices in the display cases. My instruments can't identify what they're made of. Admiral Chen walked to the nearest case and removed what looked like a simple metal sphere. This is composed of a material that exists in 7 dimensions, simultaneously. In your 3-dimensional space, it appears solid, but it's actually accessing resources from parallel realities. She tossed the sphere to Bollocks, who caught it with his mechanical hands. His sensors immediately went haywire. Impossible, he muttered, scanning the object from every angle. The mass readings are fluctuating. Sometimes it weighs as much as a feather, sometimes as much as a small asteroid, but it feels exactly the same in my hands. Mass is relative, Admiral Chen explained. When you can manipulate dimensional boundaries, physical properties become much more flexible. Navigator Senna was studying another display case. Admiral, this device appears to be showing star charts, but they're changing faster than I can follow, and some of these star systems don't exist in our galaxy. Correct, Admiral Chen said. That's a navigation aid for interdimensional travel. Those star charts show the same physical locations across multiple parallel realities. The changing displays show how stellar positions shift when you move between dimensional layers, Doctor. Kess had found something that made his translation equipment screech with feedback. What is this? It's trying to communicate, but in languages that don't exist. Admiral Chen joined him at the display. That's a communication device for speaking with species that evolved in different dimensional frameworks. Some intelligent life forms exist as pure information, others as quantum probability clouds. Standard translation protocols don't work when the speakers don't share the same physical reality. The demonstrations continued for hours. Admiral Chen showed them materials that could repair themselves by reversing local time flow, computers that solved problems by calculating every possible outcome simultaneously across infinite parallel realities, weapons that could restructure matter at the subatomic level but were kept permanently offline as a matter of policy. "Why don't you use the weapons?" Zethara asked as they observed a device that could theoretically convert any matter into any other matter instantly. "What would be the point?" Admiral Chen replied. "When you can create anything you need from basic elements, when you have unlimited energy and unlimited space, what would you fight over? Wars are fought over scarcity. Remove scarcity. Remove the cause of war." Engineer Bollocks was still struggling with the implications of what he was seeing. "Admiral, these technologies would revolutionize galactic civilization overnight. The energy solutions alone could end resource conflicts across 1,000 worlds." "Yes, they could," Admiral Chen agreed. "But they would also end the current power structures that those conflicts support. How do you think the galaxy's current leaders would react to technologies that made their positions irrelevant?" The question hung in the air as the crew considered it. Many galactic governments depended on controlling scarce resources. Remove the scarcity, and the control became meaningless. "They would fight to suppress the technology," Dr. Kess said quietly. "They would claim it was dangerous or unstable or that releasing it would cause social chaos." "Exactly," Admiral Chen said. "We've run the social models. Releasing our technology to the current galactic civilization would cause more harm than good in the short term. The existing power structures would resist change violently." Navigator Senna was examining a device that seemed to bend space around itself. "So you're waiting for the galaxy to change on its own?" "We're waiting for the galaxy to choose change," Admiral Chen corrected. "There's a difference. Change imposed from outside rarely lasts. Change chosen from within is permanent." She led them to a final demonstration that left them speechless. In the center of the room was what appeared to be an empty space marked by a simple metal ring. Admiral Chen activated a control panel, and suddenly they were looking at Earth. Not an image of Earth, not a holographic representation. They were looking through a window that showed the real Earth, over 100 light-years away in perfect real-time detail. Instantaneous observation across any distance, Admiral Chen explained. "We've been watching galactic civilization this way for centuries. We know about every war, every breakthrough, every diplomatic crisis as it happens." Dr. Kess was frantically trying to understand what he was seeing. "The information transmission alone should be impossible. Nothing travels faster than light." "Nothing travels through normal space faster than light," Admiral Chen corrected. "But information doesn't have to travel through normal space. When you can access higher dimensions, distance becomes irrelevant." The view through the window shifted, showing different worlds across the galaxy. They saw the ongoing war between the Keth and Zoriel, with ships destroying each other over mining rights to an asteroid field. They saw refugee camps on border worlds where displaced populations struggled with hunger and disease. They saw trade negotiations where wealthy species bargained for resources while poor worlds were excluded from the discussions. "This is why we wait," Admiral Chen said softly. "This is why we haven't intervened. Look at what the galaxy does with the technology it already has." The images were hard to watch. Every problem they observed could have been solved easily with human technology. The resources being fought over could have been created from nothing. The diseases could have been cured. The scarcity could have been eliminated. But instead of solving problems, the galaxy seemed content to manage them. "The Council will want to see this," Zethara said finally. "All of it. They need to understand what you're offering." Admiral Chen nodded. "We're prepared to provide a full demonstration to the Council, but they need to understand that this isn't just about technology, it's about wisdom. The tools we can offer are powerful enough to create paradise or to destroy everything that exists. She gestured toward the window, showing galactic conflicts. Your current civilization has proven it can be trusted with limited power. The question is whether it can be trusted with unlimited power. Engineer Bollocks looked up from his attempts to scan the impossible devices around them. What would it take to prove that trust? Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. That's the right question, Engineer Bollocks, but it's not one we can answer for you. The galaxy has to decide for itself what kind of civilization it wants to be. She paused, looking at each crew member in turn. We can offer you the tools to end every form of suffering that currently exists in the galaxy. We can give you technologies that would make every species equal, every world prosperous, every individual capable of reaching their full potential. The crew waited, sensing that something important was coming. But, Admiral Chen continued, accepting those tools means accepting the responsibility that comes with them. It means choosing cooperation over competition, wisdom over cleverness, the welfare of all over the advantage of a few. And if the galaxy isn't ready to make that choice? Navigator Senna asked. Admiral Chen's smile was sad, but not without hope. Then we continue to wait. We've been patient for 3 centuries. We can be patient for 3 more if necessary. She gestured toward the display cases full of impossible technology. These tools aren't going anywhere. When the galaxy is ready for them, they'll be here. When galactic civilization decides to grow up, we'll be ready to help. The demonstration was over, but its implications would echo through the galaxy for years to come. Humanity had revealed not just their technological superiority, but their moral position as well. They were offering unlimited power, but only to those wise enough to use it properly. The question now was whether the galaxy would prove itself worthy of such trust. The choice. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in the organization's history. Representatives from over 300 species packed the Great Chamber, with millions more watching through quantum communication links. The recordings and evidence that Zethara had brought back from human space had shaken the galaxy to its core. Counselor Thorne, ancient and wise, called for order as the debates grew heated. We have all seen the evidence. We have all heard the testimony. The question before us now is simple. How do we respond to humanity's offer? The offer itself was unprecedented in galactic history. Admiral Chen had transmitted a formal proposal to the Council 3 days after Zethara's return. The terms were straightforward and terrifying in their implications. Humanity would share their technology freely with any species that committed to fundamental changes in how they approached civilization. No more wars over resources that could be made infinite. No more acceptance of poverty or disease as inevitable. No more exploitation of weaker species by stronger ones. In return, humanity would provide the tools to make paradise a reality for everyone. The debates had been raging for weeks. This is madness, declared Counselor Vex, his rocky features showing stress fractures from the intensity of the discussions. They're asking us to abandon systems of government that have worked for thousands of years. They want us to restructure our entire civilization based on the promises of a species we barely understand. Counselor Nira's insect-like features clicked with agitation. More than that, they're asking us to trust them with technologies that could destroy us all. What guarantee do we have that this isn't some elaborate trap? What if they're planning to conquer the galaxy once we've dismantled our defenses? But other voices spoke in favor of accepting humanity's offer. Counselor Merrick stood before the assembly, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. 20 years ago, Captain Zethara's people found my world dying from a plague that our science couldn't cure. They didn't ask for anything in return. They didn't demand changes to our government or our culture. They simply helped because it was the right thing to do. He gestured toward the human delegation that had arrived the previous week. Admiral Chen sat quietly in the observer section, apparently unbothered by the heated debates surrounding her people's proposal. The humans could have conquered us at any point in the last 3 centuries, Merrick continued. They have the technology, they have the power, but instead of conquering, they waited. Instead of imposing their will, they offered us a choice. Counselor Yill rose from her seat, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights. But what kind of choice is it, really? Accept their demands or continue to suffer with problems they could solve easily? It feels like coercion disguised as generosity. Dr. Kess, who had been granted speaking privileges as part of the first contact team, requested permission to address the chamber. Counselors, I've spent weeks studying human technology. I've seen what they can do. They're not bluffing, and they're not exaggerating. They really can end scarcity, cure any disease, and provide unlimited energy. He paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of species represented. But more importantly, I've studied their culture. They've had these capabilities for centuries, and they've never used them to harm anyone. They could have turned themselves into gods ruling over the galaxy. Instead, they chose to wait for us to become worthy of joining them. Engineer Bollocks, his mechanical voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, added his own observations. The technology they've shown us isn't just advanced, it's responsible. Every device, every system, every capability has built-in safeguards to prevent misuse. They've spent as much effort making their tools safe as they have making them powerful. The debates continued for days. Some species immediately announced their intention to accept humanity's terms. The Vorthak, whose tree-like forms had always valued harmony and cooperation, saw the offer as a natural evolution of galactic civilization. The Nexari, whose crystalline minds processed information differently from most species, understood the mathematical elegance of humanity's proposal. But others resisted fiercely. The Keth and Zoriel, currently at war over mining rights, refused to consider ending their conflict. The Dominion of 12 Suns, which controlled trade routes through half the galaxy, saw humanity's offer as a threat to their economic power. The most vocal opposition came from the Hegemony, a collection of militaristic species that had built their entire culture around conquest and domination. "You're asking us to abandon everything that makes us strong," declared Hegemon Brutus, his scarred features showing the results of a lifetime of warfare. "You want us to give up our armies, our competitive advantages, our right to expand and grow. This isn't evolution, it's extinction." Admiral Chen finally requested permission to address the council directly. Her words, when they came, were simple and devastating. "Hegemon Brutus, your people currently control 47 star systems. You maintain this control through military force, requiring constant warfare against your neighbors. Your population lives in a state of perpetual mobilization, with most of your resources devoted to weapons and ships." She activated a holographic display showing hegemony space. With human technology, you could have the resources of 1,000 star systems without taking them from anyone. Your people could live in luxury and security without requiring a single soldier or weapon. "But we would have no enemies to defeat," Brutus protested. "No challenges to overcome. No glory to win." "You would have infinite challenges," Admiral Chen replied. "The challenge of exploring other dimensions. The challenge of understanding the fundamental nature of reality. The challenge of becoming something greater than you ever imagined possible." She looked around the chamber at all the assembled representatives. "This is what we're offering. Not the end of growth or achievement, but the beginning of growth beyond anything you've ever dreamed." The Hegemon was unmoved. "We choose our path. We will not abandon our nature to become weak like you." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested sadness rather than anger. "That is your choice to make, Hegemon. No one will force you to accept our offer." The final vote, when it came, split the galaxy almost perfectly in half. 153 species voted to accept humanity's terms and begin the transformation to a post-scarcity civilization. 147 species voted to maintain their current systems and reject the human offer. The result was unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time since the formation of the consortium, the galaxy would be divided not by war or politics, but by a fundamental choice about the future of civilization itself. Admiral Chen addressed the chamber one final time after the vote was announced. To those species that have chosen to join us, welcome. The transformation will not be easy or instant. Changing an entire civilization takes time, patience, and wisdom. We will help you every step of the way, but the work must be yours to do. She turned to address the species that had voted against the proposal. To those who have chosen to maintain your current path, that choice will be respected. Human space will remain open to you if you change your minds. Our offer is not limited. In time. But, she added, and her voice carried a note of finality, we will not permit the transformed civilizations to be threatened or attacked by those who reject transformation. Any attempt to use force against our allies will be met with decisive response. The implications were clear. Humanity had just drawn a line across the galaxy. On one side would be the species that chose cooperation, abundance, and growth. On the other would be those that chose competition, scarcity, and conflict. The question now was which side would prove to be the future of galactic civilization. As the council session ended and representatives began to disperse, Zethara found herself standing in the empty chamber with Admiral Chen. The human leader seemed smaller now, somehow more human, and less like the representative of an impossibly advanced civilization. Do you think we made the right choice? Admiral Chen asked quietly. Zethara considered the question carefully. I think you made the only choice you could make. You offered us paradise, but only if we proved we deserved it. Some of us were ready, others weren't. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. The species that rejected our offer aren't evil. They're just not ready to let go of the systems and beliefs that brought them this far. Perhaps in time they will be. And if they never are? Admiral Chen's smile was sad but patient. Then we continue as we have for 3 centuries, watching, waiting, hoping that eventually the galaxy will choose wisdom over power. As they walked out of the chamber together, Zethara realized that the greatest revelation wasn't humanity's technology or their capabilities. It was their restraint. A species with the power of gods had chosen to wait patiently for the rest of the galaxy to grow up, rather than forcing change from above. The silence that had puzzled galactic civilization for so long finally made sense. It wasn't the silence of the absent or the dead. It was the silence of those wise enough to speak only when they had something worth saying. And humanity had finally decided that the galaxy was ready to listen. At least, half of it was ready.